Ugh, Rick, I've been seeing all these articles about how, boomers are broke now or whatever, and I don't get it. Didn't they, have it super easy? Jobs everywhere? Cheap houses? All that stuff? How did they screw it up so bad?
Oh, Jesus Christ, Morty. You think you're asking a smart question, but you're actually revealing how profoundly you don't understand structural economic shifts and institutional risk transfer. But fine, I'll explain it to your smooth brain. Sit down and try not to interrupt me with your Yeah, you're gonna interrupt me anyway. Look, the boomers didn't screw it up, Morty. The game got changed on them mid-play, and most of them didn't even notice until it was too late. You wanna know what actually happened? Here's what happened. Buckle up. So back in the old days, Morty, and by old days I mean like the 1950s through maybe the early 80s, if you worked for a decent company, they gave you something called a pension, a defined benefit plan. You understand what that means? No, of course you don't. It means the company promised you, Morty, a specific amount of money every month after you retired until you died. The game got changed on them mid-play, and most of them didn't even notice until it was too late. You wanna know what actually happened? Here's what happened. Buckle up. But then, and this is where it gets interesting, some genius in corporate America was like, hey, wait a minute, why are we taking all this risk? Why are we promising people money for 30 years after they stop working? That's expensive and unpredictable and cuts into our profits. So they invented something called the 401k. Sounds technical, sounds official. It's actually just a way to make retirement your problem instead of theirs. Defined contribution, Morty. You put money in, maybe they match a little bit if you're lucky, and then boom, you're in charge of your own retirement. You pick the investments, you deal with the market, you figure out how long your money needs to last. All the risk, every single ounce of it, is transferred from institutions with resources and expertise to individuals who think the stock market is some kind of casino where the house doesn't always win.
But Rick, isn't that, good though? Don't people want control over their own money and stuff?
Oh, Morty, you beautiful idiot. You're confusing freedom with responsibility. Yeah, sure, some people wanted control, but most people, Morty, have no idea what they're doing. They don't understand sequence of returns risk. They don't understand asset allocation. They don't know the difference between a Roth and a traditional IRA. They just check a few boxes on a form their HR department gave them and hope it works out. And the boomers were the first generation to test this system at scale. They were the lab rats, Morty, the guinea pigs. And you know what the results showed? Millions of them, arrived at retirement age with inadequate savings and no guaranteed income stream. They did everything quote-unquote right. They saved when they could. They didn't blow it all on avocado toast or whatever the hell people blame young people for now. And they still lost because the system was designed to transfer risk away from corporations and onto individuals who were never equipped to handle it. Now let's talk about longevity, Morty, because this is where the math really starts to hurt. When Social Security was invented back in 1935, the retirement age was set at 65. You know what the average life expectancy was back then? About 61. You see the problem? The system was designed assuming most people would die before they collected or would only collect for a few years. But now, Morty, people are living into their 80s and 90s routinely. Retirements don't last 5 or 10 years anymore. They last 25, 30, sometimes 35 years. That's longer than most people's actual careers. And here's the kicker. Inflation eats away at fixed retirement income the entire time.
But isn't inflation, pretty low though? 2 or 3% or whatever?
Wrong, Morty. Well, not wrong for retirees. See, the official inflation rate, the CPI, that's an average across the whole economy. But retirees don't spend money like the average person. They spend way more on healthcare, on prescription drugs, on services. And those costs have been rising way faster than the official inflation rate for decades. So even if your Social Security benefits get a cost of living adjustment, a COLA, that adjustment is based on the overall inflation rate, not the actual inflation rate that retirees experience. Which means every single year their purchasing power declines. Every year. It's not dramatic, it's not a crash, it's just a slow, grinding, inevitable loss of buying power. Compound that over 25 or 30 years, and suddenly that retirement plan that looked adequate at age 65 leaves you eating cat food at age 85. It's entropy, Morty. Economic entropy. Everything tends toward disorder and poverty. And speaking of healthcare, holy hell, Morty, this is the big one. This is the financial shock that almost nobody plans for adequately. People think Medicare is free healthcare. It's not. It covers a lot, sure, but there are premiums, deductibles, copays, and it doesn't cover everything. Prescription drugs can cost hundreds or thousands of dollars a month, even with Part D coverage. Dental care, not covered. Vision care, not covered. Hearing aids, not covered. And the real killer, the thing that financially destroys families, long-term care, nursing homes, assisted living, memory care facilities. Most people will need some form of long-term care eventually, and Medicare doesn't cover it. Medicaid might, but only after you've spent down almost all your assets. A semi-decent nursing home can cost $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 a month. Multiply that by a few years and you're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. Almost nobody, and I mean almost nobody, Morty, plans for this. They think, oh, I'll just stay healthy, or my kids will take care of me, or it won't happen to me. Denial, pure biological denial, and then boom, stroke, dementia, fall, whatever, and suddenly the family is liquidating assets to pay for care. Healthcare costs are the #1 cause of bankruptcy among retirees, not market crashes, not inflation. Healthcare, the thing you definitely know you're gonna need, but somehow convince yourself won't be a problem.
But Rick, didn't the boomers, like, buy houses and stuff? Aren't those worth a lot of money now? Can't they just, like, use that?
Ah, Morty, now we're getting to the cruel irony at the heart of this whole thing. Yes, many boomers bought houses. In fact, for a lot of them, their house represents the majority of their net worth. On paper, they look wealthy. But here's the thing, and pay attention because this is important. Home equity doesn't pay for groceries. It doesn't pay for utilities or healthcare or property taxes or maintenance. It just sits there locked up in an illiquid asset that you live in. Your house rich and cash poor. Now you've got a few options to access that wealth. You can sell the house, but then where do you live? You still need housing, and if you're selling in a high-cost area and moving somewhere cheaper, okay, maybe that works, but you're leaving your community, your doctors, your support system, or you can borrow against it with a home equity loan or a reverse mortgage. But those have costs, fees, interest rates. Reverse mortgages especially are complicated and expensive financial products that often benefit the lender more than the borrower. So yeah, technically the boomers have wealth, but it's trapped in a form they can't easily access without significant trade-offs and costs. It's like having $1 million in a bank account that charges you $50,000 every time you make a withdrawal. Technically you're a millionaire, but functionally you're broke. And this brings me to the real point, Morty, the thing that nobody wants to admit because it ruins the narrative. When people talk about boomer wealth, they're talking about aggregate numbers, total wealth across the entire generation. But that wealth is distributed incredibly unequally. The top 10 or 20% of boomers, yeah, they're doing great. They have pensions and savings and paid off houses and investment portfolios. But the median boomer, the one right in the middle, has way less than people think. Studies show the median retirement savings for boomers approaching retirement is something like $150,000 to $200,000. That might sound like a lot to you because you're a kid, but using the 4% rule, which is a standard safe withdrawal rate, that's only $6,000 to $8,000 a year in income. Combined with Social Security, which averages around $1,800 a month, you're looking at a total retirement income of maybe $30,000 to $35,000 a year. That's not comfortable living, Morty. That's financial fragility. One major expense, one health crisis, and you're wiped out. And in fact, we're seeing exactly that. More and more retirees are carrying debt into retirement. Credit card debt, mortgage debt, even student loan debt from loans they took out for their kids. More boomers are working past 65 than in previous generations, not because they love their jobs, but because they can't afford to stop. The promised golden years, the reward for a lifetime of work, it's not materializing for most of them. Not because they were lazy or stupid or didn't follow the rules, but because the entire structure of retirement shifted from institutional guarantees to individual risk management, and most individuals aren't equipped to manage that risk effectively, especially over a 30-year time horizon with healthcare cost inflation and longevity risk.
So, like, does that mean we're screwed too then? Like, if the boomers couldn't do it, how are we supposed to?
Finally, Morty, a question that isn't completely stupid. And the answer is, you're probably screwed if you play the same game they played. If you just follow the default path, work a job, save a little in a 401k, hope Social Security is still around, buy a house, and assume that's enough, yeah, you're gonna end up in the same place or worse. Social Security is projected to only be able to pay about 70 to 80% of promised benefits by the time you retire, unless they reform it. Pensions are basically extinct. Healthcare costs aren't getting cheaper. Housing is already unaffordable for your generation. The default retirement game is broken. So what do? You don't play the default game, Morty. First you assume you're on your own. Don't count on Social Security being there in full. Don't assume Medicare will cover your healthcare. Plan as if you have to fund the entire thing yourself. That means you need to save way more than the traditional 10 or 15%. You probably need to be saving 25, 30, even 40% of your income if you start late. Yeah, that sounds impossible. But you know what else sounds impossible? Working until you're 80 because you didn't save enough. Second, you need to understand what you're investing in. Don't just check random boxes on a form. Learn about index funds, diversification, asset allocation, tax-advantaged accounts. It's not that complicated if you spend like 20 hours learning it, which is nothing compared to the decades of financial security it can provide. Third, you need multiple income streams. Don't rely on just one source. Retirement accounts, taxable investments, maybe real estate that actually generates rental income, not just equity. Side businesses, skills you can monetize. Diversify your income the same way you diversify your investments. Fourth, and this is big, optimize for flexibility, not just accumulation. Having $1 million locked in a 401k that you can't touch until 60 without penalties isn't as useful as having $600,000 that you can access at any time. Build up taxable accounts alongside retirement accounts. Have liquidity, because life doesn't wait until you're 65 to throw expensive problems at you. Fifth, plan for healthcare costs explicitly. Look into HSA's health savings accounts, which are triple tax advantaged if you use them right. Research long-term care insurance, though it's expensive and maybe not worth it depending on your situation. At minimum, have a realistic number for how much healthcare will cost you in retirement and build that into your planning. Spoiler alert, it's a lot more than you think. And finally, Morty, be willing to do things differently than previous generations. Maybe retirement at 65 isn't realistic or even desirable. Maybe you work part-time forever doing something you enjoy. Maybe you move somewhere cheaper instead of staying in an expensive city out of habit. Maybe you build a lifestyle that costs way less than the average American lifestyle, so you don't need millions of dollars to sustain it. Maybe you focus on building skills and relationships that have value beyond just earning money. The old model was work until 65, then stop and live off savings. That model is broken. You need a new model. The boomers did everything right according to the rules they were given, and they still lost because the rules changed underneath them. And the new rules were designed to benefit corporations and financial institutions, not individual workers. You, Morty, you have the advantage of seeing how this played out. You can see the results of the experiment. So don't repeat it. Don't assume the default path will work. Don't trust that institutions will take care of you. Take control of your financial future in a way that actually acknowledges the reality of modern retirement, which is that it's entirely your responsibility. It's gonna last longer than you think. It's gonna cost more than you expect. And nobody is coming to save you if you screw it up. That's the lesson, Morty. Not that the boomers failed, but that the system failed them. And it will fail you too if you let it. So don't let it. Build something different. Or don't, and end up broke at 80, eating cat food and wondering where it all went wrong. Your choice. Now get out of my garage. I've got science to do, and your existential dread is bringing down the vibe.